The first one was when I left the cult. You develop a really low sense of self. I wasn't enough to fight for, but my kids were.
Quit telling yourself that you have to have achieved the readiness before you take the step. Just know that you're approaching it every single day.
I'm living proof that they were wrong.
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to GrowthReady, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, high-performance coach Rebecca Mountain joins the show to unpack what readiness means to her.
You never actually achieve it, you approach it, but you never actually ever get to that point of being ready. And that readiness is like a millisecond in time.
Rebecca helps us understand that self-trust is a difference maker on our growth journey, but as you'll soon discover, whether we are willing to do the work to build that trust, well, that's up to us. Hey guys, as we get started here with the episode, I want to just take 1 minute of your time to make a request for you to subscribe and rate the show. For our show to be easily discovered by other potential listeners, we need our current listeners, that's you, to take the time to not only subscribe, but to also rate the show. Whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, whatever platform of choice, there are typically ways to be rating the show. So go ahead and click something like that 5th star and be sure to take that additional time to leave a comment or two about why it is you enjoy listening to the GrowthReady podcast. Your efforts on this will allow our show to be more discoverable, which means we're going to find more listeners and continue to have that significant impact on the community of human performance and personal development that I know you are all benefiting from by being listeners to this show. Please go ahead, take the time, subscribe, rate the show today. Hey, and while you're at it, why don't you share it with a few people as well? I appreciate you guys. Let's get to the interview. Hello there, and welcome back into the most recent installment of the GrowthReady podcast. I'm delighted to be welcoming in Rebecca Mountain to GrowthReady today. And before we go any further, Rebecca, you have to answer the question that I have everybody ask before we get started, and that is, what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
So to me, growth ready is sort of one of those nebulous concepts, like I need to feel motivated, or I need to be confident. You never actually achieve it, you approach it, but you never actually ever get to that point of being ready. You are either approaching readiness or you're doing. And that readiness is like a millisecond in time at which you decide, both emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, all those kind of things, that you're done waiting, you're done preparing, and you're ready to do. So is that really, it's kind of like snuffleupagus. It doesn't really exist. And for those of you who are like, what the heck is a snuffleupagus? Can I swear on this podcast? I have no idea if I can swear.
You can swear a little bit.
Okay, I'll keep it PG. What the heck is a snuffleupagus? Those are my Sesame Street people. You can all look it up, right? Yeah. And a snuffleupagus, by the way, is phonetic. So that's my concept of readiness, and it is something people either use as an excuse or a launch pad.
Excuse versus launch pad. We're going to get to that. But I immediately appreciate this notion of we're never arriving, but we're always approaching.
Yeah.
Never arriving, always approaching. So let's start right there. And I'd love to use some of your story and some of your journey to how you may make this argument for our listeners. And so when you think about all the ups and downs, as I've come to learn about your story, where would you start, or where would there maybe be a moment or five on your journey where you can point to, okay, it was always in the approach, it was never in the actual arrival?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first one was when I left the cult, right, in 2008. So it's one of those things where I know it wasn't good for me, it wasn't healthy, It wasn't safe. I wasn't happy. I was never going to be happy. It was never going to change because I was fundamentally and philosophically and spiritually disengaging from what the cult was teaching, right? So there's religions out there that are very warm and loving and kind, and this was not that. So getting ready to leave was, trying to foresee into the future, like, how would I live? I didn't know how to get a mortgage. I didn't know how the world worked. I was very isolated and very naive about how it was. And
And
I
for
probably,
for our listeners as well, just give some more context to how long you were a part of a cult.
oh, yeah, sure. So, 2008, so I'm going to age myself. So 2008, I was 32 and I entered the cult when I was 8 years old. So I didn't obviously choose to go into the cult. My mother did. And my dad joined because of my mom. And then myself and my siblings were all in. So I was 8. I might have been 7, actually. I keep saying I was 8. I'm thinking, I might have been even younger, but let's just call it 8 for shits and giggles. So my sister would have been 9, my brother would have been 7, and my little sister would have been 5. So we all, as a little pack, we went into this cult. So I got into it. I followed all the rules. I was very afraid of breaking the rules. I've always been the good girl. And even as I grew older and my sisters, they left very quietly, but they're like, basically they moved out and they're like, we're not going to do this anymore. I married into it. I was very, very big part of it. But then over time, I just sort of thinking like, something's wrong with this. This doesn't sound like what it's supposed to be. So that's sort of the background on the cult.
And it also helps us truly appreciate just the severity of the shift, the severity of the change that you then endured.
Like,
in
I wasn't
2008.
supposed to work as a woman. I wasn't supposed to work. I was not and I got ostracized from the church because I did, because my ex and I couldn't live on one income. It was impossible. So he knew I had to work and he was absolutely fine with it, because we wouldn't be able to survive without it, but very much was ostracized by the church. He wasn't, I was. So nothing changed for him. It didn't matter. He just had a wayward wife, right? So, when you're trying so hard to follow the rules and you're not following the rules, but you can't not follow, like it's impossible to follow what people are trying to tell you to do because you can't survive. So it became a very, very lonely place. So leaving a place like that, they tell you there's 2 ways you're going to die if you even think about leaving. So it's not just leaving that can create the trauma, it's thinking about leaving. That idea of getting ready to leave was terrifying because your thoughts could get you in trouble. And so that's a type of programming that's been actually really tough to deprogram, but that's kind of what I was up against. So I didn't know how to get a mortgage. I didn't know how to get cable. I've never worn makeup. I'd never gone, to parties or dances or clubs or bars, or I've never had a drink. I'd never said the word fuck. And like, there's all these different things at 32. I'm just like, can I do this? And when I decided to go, it was actually, I don't know if I actually would have left if I didn't have that near death experience when I rolled my car on a QEW. And by rolling, a QEW is like a 6-lane highway here, but by rolling it, I mean, I went flying backwards off of an on-ramp because I hit ice, and crashed onto the hood of my car. And, it's amazing that I came out of it. If I didn't have that cataclysmic event, I may not have ever been quote unquote ready enough to leave. But that was my real big wake up call of, you got to go. You have to go, because I was just lucky. Next time I'm not going to be lucky. The readiness came from a huge wake up call, but it also came because you develop a really low sense of self, very, very low sense of self-worth. But I wasn't enough to fight for, but my kids were. So the launch pad for that was catastrophic event, near tragic catastrophic event. And then finding the worthiness of, what it is I would have to do. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't get any help from my parents. I had no friends. I had no, context. I got fired because I worked for people in the church, so I had no job. So all of this happened all at once, and there's no way that I would ever have said I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
It was what I was in was so demonic and so self-crushing, self-sabotaging, that anything would be better, whatever that looked like. And it's been quite the journey since 2008. Lots of ups and downs, like you said, a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, well, from 2008 to eventually now today, arriving as a high performance coach, best-selling author, international keynote speaker, all of these things, and more of that we will get to see the value that you bring in all those areas as we continue to talk. But I have to dive further into some of the conflicting influences at that time, because I think they're so relevant to anybody that's listening to this now. Because what you were explaining there, as I was hearing it, was there's this internal battle of truly establishing what do I want, who do I want it for, the worthiness component, and then there's all this external influence of these perspectives that say, if you were to act on any of that internal desire, of those internal wants, well, I'm sorry, but you're wayward. You use that word wayward. It's just like you're now acting in a wayward manner. You're moving away from the direction that has been created for you and set for you, and that is supposed to be the one that you're on. And again, this really comes back to your original insight there at the beginning of the arrival versus the ongoing. It's just like we're never arriving, because we're always approaching, and that what seems to be such a clear, direct line at that juncture. You just said, I don't want that line anymore. I'm going away from this line. In fact, to heck with this line altogether. I'm charting my own course. I'm getting off of this whole journey that I'm currently on. And like I said, there's for you going back to that point in time, and I know you talk about this often. How does one in that situation, and how did you in that situation balance the conflicting influences, this internal want for you and obviously your boys, versus I can't imagine there would have been much encouragement, if any encouragement, around you for you to act on any of that internal want. So how are you managing those conflicting influences, if you will?
Well, what I did is I used my brain, and instead of imagining the fear and the, death and destruction that was surely going to rain down upon my head if I ever left, I just asked myself the question, but what if they're wrong? Because I was supposed to die in that car crash. I was not supposed to live because I'd thought about leaving. So my thoughts were wayward. They were wrong. And so I was supposed to be punished. And I was supposed to be punished in the way they told me I was supposed to be punished. And I was supposed to die in the car crash. So if they're wrong about that, what else are they wrong about? And if they're wrong about that, what would be something else that could possibly be? And I started to think and look around for, what are other people doing? And has anyone else had, what you don't meet a lot of people who leave cults. It's not a common happening. Although whenever
it was one of the first things you told me when we met, and I was just like, that's an opener right there. That's
it is. That's a good one.
That's an opener right there.
Yeah. So you're like, wait, what? And so basically, two things sort of happened. I developed a loose plan, an idea that okay, I could get another job. I left the cult before I lost my job. So that was the last nail in the coffin. That was the last cruel thing that happened to me as part of the church, which I thought was particularly mean. They also fired me over Christmas, which was really, really mean. And then they made me play at the Christmas concert because I'm a classically trained pianist. And so they made me play at the Christmas concert after they fired my ass. Anyway, so that was nice. And so part of it is just like, I will get a job. I will be able to, I can manage. We had a house that had, it had appreciated value, so we'd have to sell it. So I'd get some money so I wouldn't be completely destitute. So I knew that I would have a little bit of a cushion. And then when I got fired, I'm like, well, I'm just gonna have to go get another job. And when I got, a year later, got fired from that one. Well, I fired and quit at the same time. So it's kind of like a half and half. That's when I started my own journey. And so I did not start my own job because I was like, unicorns and peaches. And like, I just want to do my own thing. No, I was unemployable. But that was sort of a year later. But more to the point, I had the plan, and I just developed the tiniest little acorn seed of self-trust that I could figure this out. that no matter what, I would find a way. And, I'd always been called a bulldozer. This is my performance reviews when I was working, so you can imagine why I kept getting fired. Bulldozer, my all-time highest score for horrible things on performance reviews was I leave carnage in my wake. I particularly like that one. That was good. I should have just taken a picture of that one. I'm like, yeah, Frank. Yeah. Anyway, so I would take that bad part of me and I would make it into something good. I'm like, how can I take this, balls to the wall, I'm not going to go down. I'm just not going to go down. I'm going to figure this out. And I just needed a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit. I didn't know how it was going to work. And again, by the time I completely blew up and divorced and, pulled everything apart, because I was divorced by December. So I rolled the car in March, left the church in August, got separated in October, divorced in December, unemployed in January 12th, actually. So this is the anniversary of when they,
wow, look at this.
Yeah. When I went finally, like, completely detached myself from that cult. So I think those are sort of the two things. You start thinking not in catastrophic ways of like all the horrible things that could happen to me. And by horrible things, that was pretty bad what I went through, that you think you're going to leave and you're going to die. Yes. But it was also, they'd program things like, you never know. So you're always, every time I would leave, I'd turn on my car and I'm like, and now I'm going to die. Like, I still struggle with 2-lane roads, with cars coming at me. Cause I'm just like, is that it? Is that it? Is that it? Like, right. It's really, really tough. And there's programming that's very deep that will always take a long time to get out of. So those are the kinds of things that I'm like, but I'll figure it out. But I'll figure it out. And to have something, so I guess the third thing would be to have something worth living for.
Yes.
Worth changing for. Like, I was suffering, and I looked at my 2 little boys. They were 3 and 5 at the time. They're 20 and 22 now. And I'm like, they're not going to go through this.
Yeah.
They are not going to go through this. No one is going to do to them what they did to me. Right now, the church has got about 458 open FBI cases on child sexual assault. It's truly a terrible place. Yeah. Mercifully, that never happened to me. But all of the judgment, rejection, the making you small, making you scared, I never wanted my children to go through that. So just having that thing that no matter how hard this is going to be, it's worth it. And again, for me, because I had such a low self-esteem and such low self-worth, it wasn't worth it to me. I wasn't thinking about myself because I couldn't yet. That took time, took years. But my boys were. And I'm like, that's what I'm doing it for. And so it just sort of, it lifts you past the really, really hard days, of which there have been many.
Yeah, I have no doubt. And thank you for sharing all of that. And I think it, again, not only does it reinforce just the magnitude that you were practicing so much of what you were speaking to just now, but at the same time, just coming from my world of working with athletes over the years, even my own life, as I've spoken about on your own podcast, like for me, I listen to you and I can't help, my mind immediately goes to no matter how difficult a time we might have gone through, for whatever reason, it makes it seem that the shift in itself to get away from that is somehow harder. Like, and for me, that's the fascinating part. It's like we can be in the middle, and the way you described everything there, it's like, this is truly horrific what you're going through and what you went through for 20 plus years. And yet, because of the familiarity around it, if we can't anchor in those moments, like, this is the real reason I need to do something now. And I love how you said, I found that teeny tiny seed of self-trust. And it's like that tiny little catalyst can be the one thing you need to finally bridge toward that life, toward that journey in future, that even though it seems like it's going to be an absolutely enormous climb and an enormous lift, you can finally see the need to go take it on.
Yeah, that little tiny seed of self-trust, and coupled with finding something worth trusting yourself for, that takes that readiness line, and instead of like being always behind it, You leap ahead of it.
In that moment. In that
right,
moment.
in that
Right.
moment. And
Yes.
you'll never know, oh, I was ready when. You can't answer that question.
Sure.
Because you don't know when that was. It just happened, right? But it's just like, because it's easy. Think about it like falling into a hole. It's easy to slide into a hole.
Right.
But to pull yourself out of it, like that's where the effort is. And because there's effort, you have to find something that's worth the effort. And that tiny little modicum of self-trust of like, I'll just figure it out. And again, over the years, that experience of coming out of that helped me to get through a lot of other things, right? Like I'm writing my 4th book. I'm editing it right now. Most people never write one, right? But I'm just like, I don't know how to write a book, but I'll figure it out. And, you get help when you need to. And so these things, you start kind of understanding when you need to bring in help and when you need to do it yourself and, all these kinds of things. But if I didn't have that little tiny, teeny, tiny seed of self-trust that I've tried to like nurture and grow, and trust me, like I scorched it a bunch of times, right? But because you gotta tend to this little guy. But yeah, it does take effort to get out, and it was easy for me to stay in based on my excuses. And the excuses were legit. I don't know how the fucking world works. I don't know how to, go out on my own. I barely pay any bills on time, if ever, and it's not a coincidence. I have 2 husbands and both of them are finance guys, right? It's like, well, I'm terrible at it, right? So, but you have to find something that's internal and then a little bit external, right? So it's that to kind of start giving you, because it does take effort to pull out of it, and you're going to slide and it's going to feel like, fuck, this is never going to work. You got to be able to get through those.
There's that idea that excuse is in the action now. Like we're arriving at that here a little bit. But what I also can't help but see, and again, this just relates with me having been an athlete, having been a coach of athletes, and the work we both do now. Like there's this moment where the internal work suddenly just develops this little external component to it. And you said something in your story earlier of what if they're wrong? And there was something in that question where it's like that has originated from some internal work. You've developed that seed of trust in yourself. You've suddenly started to gain an appetite for what you might want and why you want it and who you want it for. And then you've used a question like, what if they're wrong? And I can't help but hear that and be like, was that it? Was that the question that just said, and here we go? Like, here's the step now. Here's the first step in this whole thing. Talk to us a little bit about the psyche, I guess, around that of the internal work. And then suddenly there's a question that forces you to look around you and say, yeah, but what if they're wrong? What if I'm right and they're wrong?
Yeah. And you go, and like, what if they're wrong is like, that is the question, but at some point it must become a statement. They are wrong.
They are wrong.
They are wrong. And then that's kind of, if you look at a moment of, if there was ever anything that approached a moment of readiness, it's when standing at the side of the road, I had ruined everyone's, I closed the highway because I spun like all over the show.
Right.
There's glass and, debris everywhere. And I'm staring at my squished car and shaking the glass out of my head. I'm living proof that they were wrong. And if they're wrong about this, what else are they wrong? So it's not a question now of if they're wrong. Proof. They are wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong. And I am now free.
Yeah.
And that is how the whole thing, I am free because they are wrong. And I've used that because often, as we go through, people tell us, oh, you can't do that. There's no way you can do that. You're not going to write a book. Who do you think you are? Da, da, da. And that whole thing, I'm just like, yeah, but you're wrong. You're just wrong. And then if they're wrong, then I am free. And so that whole programming that started, standing at the side of the road and that cold March morning, squished up car and, fire trucks and shit everywhere. I reach back to that as a point of strength, right? To be like, okay, yeah, if they were wrong about that and I was able to leap, that whole idea, because often when it comes to excuses, what is it? What if? And that's what kept me in that cult very, very late. Like, I was married for 11 years the first time and with my ex for 17. So it's not like a tiny amount of time. We had 2 boys and all this kind of stuff. And I knew that in the church, if we separated, so if we divorced, he was not allowed to remarry until I was dead. So I had the guilt on top of all of the other stuff that I was relegating this man to a life of celibacy, and he was only 35. Right? And that one thing was the excuse that delayed it. Can I do this to him? Can I do this to somebody? And again, that cataclysmic event was just like, yeah, that's a him problem. Like, I'm not staying in this thing anymore. So if he chooses to, like, knock your socks off. Although I will say, when he got engaged, I was just like, should I go into hiding? Because I don't know if he's going to adhere to that rule or not. But anyway, thankfully, mercifully, he didn't. So clearly, see, dodged a bullet twice. But yeah, so is that you have to make the if into a statement?
Yeah.
There's the wrong.
I think it's time for you and I to both step into coach mode a little bit for our listeners, because that's the work right there. Because I think a lot of people are asking the question of what if they're wrong, or they're asking the question like, what if I can? Like, almost internalizing it. Similar sort of question, but same area that it's being created in terms of that doubt in our mind. And so for me, I now want to hear you maybe speak through in some of your work now more recently of you have people coming to you, whether it be on behalf of themselves, their business, their goals, their whatever it is. They're coming to you, and in some way, shape, or form, they're coming to you because they're not sure that they're ready to turn that question into a statement. They're still stuck in the question. And so what does that work look like from your perspective, just to simply shift a person's mind from, let's stop analyzing and questioning, let's shift now into this intentionality and this action?
Yeah. So action is actually a result of two previous pieces of work, and that's what you feel and what you think. So what you think actually can drive your feelings. Your feelings can also drive your thoughts. So it's kind of like this, quagmire. And if you don't have a framework to be able to kind of pull that apart and see like what's really going on, it will always create some sort of a stagnation, or you're just like running all over the place, or you're just trying 1,000 things, but you never see anything through. Because like what you feel and what you think becomes what you do. So I sort of take that and expand it a little bit to be like, okay, well, if that's the case, to me, there are three major reasons or major areas in which if we become really, really good, excuses just evaporate, because we hear them. It sounds, that sounds like this. And this is how I'm going to process that. So the first part is aligning your beliefs. So it can be considered mindset, but to me, mindset's like a snapshot in time. A mindset is something, it's like, I have today. This is my mindset today, but I'm going to wake up tomorrow and it's going to be different. But my beliefs, they never change, right? Or they change much slower. And so, and your beliefs are what you feel about something, and creating complex language around that. And understanding the role emotions play in our lives. We don't focus on emotions nearly as much as we should, but 95% of our decisions are emotional.
Yeah.
And so especially in business, if you don't understand the emotions that your clients or your targets are going to go through and how you need to approach that, well, you're just going to come at them and just like poke them in the eyeballs and tell them to buy your stuff. Well, it doesn't really work. You could be doing the right thing, making calls, doing whatever, writing books, speaking on stage, all that. But if you don't understand how you want people to feel when you're talking, well, they're never going to get there. Right? So, emotions, and then of course thoughts. And then the last piece of what goes into creating aligned beliefs is to go through that extra stage, which took me a very long time to get to define what actually makes you happy and then protect it. So you define it and you defend it. Because a lot of people are like, well, I'd like that, but and here come the big butts, right? So, and I don't like big butts, and I definitely will stand behind that. And butts being B-U-T. Yeah. And so when you say, okay, I'm going to understand my emotions, just understand that you have them and the role they play in what you do. That's it. That's all we're talking about. You go to therapy if you want, but you just have to understand that emotions are kicking in here, and how thoughts will drive and expand those. Like you can have a thought like, what if I can do this? And if you've got a big emotion behind it, it will just amplify it. And now it looks really scary. When really it's just like, well, no, you just need to do this, right? So you make everything small and reasonable. And that becomes your internal aligned belief. So aligned means you're going in a certain direction. This is what I want. This is what I feel. This is what I think. Here we go. Right? Then you move into taking decisive action. So that's one of the things you were talking about, acting with intentionality, acting with decisiveness. But that starts, so that's again also a three-parter. It starts with, well, who are you serving in the first place? Right. Like, do you know? But that's not niching, because everyone freaks out as soon as you say create a niche. They're like, oh, my business is going to die. No, it's not. Right? But what it's more about is activating the reticular activation part of your brain to be like, but look for these people. And your brain won't look for what has not been defined. So you define like, who it is, and then you line up, how do I need to adjust, and do my services actually fix this, right? The problem. So once you have that, okay, this is who I am trying to sell to, influence, lead, whatever. Then you get into, okay, here's the work you should do. But I particularly love this part because I have a framework called ADORE, which stands for automate, delegate, outsource, replace, and eliminate. So you do a task audit for a week, which everyone hates, but is really, really great. Because you just see how much stupid stuff you're doing. You're like, oh my God, like you have to admit to it. It's like when you enter like what you're eating into one of those calorie counter kind of things. You're like, oh, do I admit to the ice cream? Right. So, you do that, but then you take a look and say, okay, if you were to wave a magic wand and only do the work that is ideal for you, what is it? It's usually a very small subset, and then you quote unquote adore the rest. So you eliminate distractions and work that is not what makes you happy, is not aligned with your beliefs, and that someone else can do better. And people struggle with leadership, going from doing to leading. That's the messiest transition for people, but so that's a lot of what I do. Because a lot of people get to the point where like, okay, I don't want to do, I want to lead now. And that's where this comes into really play, but then all the emotional stuff that goes into it. And then of course, the last piece of taking decisive action is like, what do you do? And there again, it's eliminate, because there was a guy, I can't even remember who it was. It was a very successful guy, ran courses, had 10 courses, and finally did an analysis. And of the 10 courses, only 2 actually drove money. And yet he was spending all of these marketing dollars on all these other courses that weren't doing it. So he slashed that budget, put all of his eggs behind the 2, and that's when he really scaled. So taking decisive action, which is the second sort of pillar, isn't just like, what do you do? Because that will lead to spaghetti on a wall. But it's really narrowing it in and, who, and then what, and then how. Those kind of 3 things. And of course, the last piece, the last big pillar is the high performance habits. And these are the ones that are, from Brendan Burchard, scientifically backed to deliver things like higher income, stronger relationships, greater joy and fulfillment. So, I'm a stats geek and I'm like, oh, really? And so I read up the whole report, and there's a distinct statistically valid difference and lift when you practice these habits, which I'll just go through them really quick. Clarity, which is the purpose, the meaningfulness behind what you do. So it's not just what's your goal, it's why are you doing it. Energy, you have to take care of yourself. If you don't, you ain't gonna do it. Courage, which is, doing things because they're hard. Not despite the fact they're hard. You do it because it's hard. And because when you're lifting yourself out of that hole, that means if it's hard, it's working. You're working. You're moving. You're ahead of that ready curve, right? So if it's just rolling and you're just gonna like coasting along, you're on the wrong side of ready. So courage is the third one. Productivity, of no surprise, is number 4. But that's again, it's how you use the time. Time is a tool. It's not something you own, not something you manufacture. You don't have it. You don't make it, right? You don't try. It's like, how can you actually get... That's why when you really practice productivity, I can get more done in 2 hours than most people can get done in 2 days. Right. It's just because I know the tricks and I actually do it. So, that stuff like putting your phone away, not doom scrolling, and, some of those little things, and not allowing interruptions. People pleasers love that because they always want to help everybody. Right. And so then the 5th one is influence. So how do you actually, and this is, again, it brings in emotions, because you have to understand, I work with a lot with realtors, and right now it's a really tough market. And so I said to them, I train a team up here, a team of 10. And so I said to them, okay, how are you going to win in 2026? The market is garbage and you're up against a ton of competition. And they're like, we're going to go in with more knowledge and we're going to wow them with what we know. And I'm just like, ooh, like my next book is literally called Knowing Isn't Enough. So I'm like, right. Because what they need to understand from an influential perspective is, what are the emotions these people are going to feel to make them stop and start, right? So what barriers, like, if they have like, cousin Bob just got his license, so I feel guilty saying no to him. Well, that's what you got to do. And don't tell them everything you fucking know. Right. It's like help them with getting rid of cousin Bob, right? And give them the so those kinds of things. So influence is not just persuasion, and it's not those kind of frameworks. It's understanding the emotional piece. And then the last one that's kind of like the big umbrella for everything is called necessity, which is how can you stay committed? And for this one, I always get people to name the boogeyman, because to stay committed, you need a plan, you need to be aligned, you need to take decisive action, all the things we just talked about. But at some point, life's going to get hard. The excuses are going to feel easy. You're going to start to slide down that hole again. And so what I say to people is, what's the scariest thing that could happen to you if you stop working? Like if you stop putting in the effort. And, some of them, and I did this with my private client group. And honest to God, Steve, I got frightened by what these people were saying. Like, my bad thing is I have to get a job, and I clearly fail at working for anybody, right? So I'm like, I would get a job and that would be really bad. These people were like, their grandchildren were heroin addicts. They lived in a box under the highway. And I'm just like,
really let their imagination.
Oh, cool. God, yeah. But you know what? It worked. Because like a week later, they're like, that scared the living daylights out of me. So I'm like, I doubled. And this was the end of December. They're doubling down on their work and whatever. I'm like, I should get these guys to scare themselves all the time. But so that's kind of thing. And so to summarize, aligned beliefs, decisive action, and high performance habits, and you must have all three. You can't just have a good mindset and then do willy-nilly whatever. You can't do work but be an emotional disaster. And you can't do any of those things if you don't have the habits and the routines and like the consistency, because you and I both know what's the number one way of getting into the top 10 podcasts of all time? Consistency. Yeah. Don't fail. Yeah. just don't stop. Literally, like literally to get into the top 10%, you have to last as a podcast more than 8 months. That's it. That's because what happens? Everyone's like, oh yeah, this is great. Bad habits, off a cliff. Right. So that was a very long answer to a very simple question, but that's the methodology. That's what I coach.
And I happily and willingly let you talk, because for me, the constant throughout all of that was this reoccurring theme of the emotion. And we have in the millions of emotional responses every single day to the tens, maybe if we're very productive, 100 truly rational, intentional thoughts in any given day. And so I can't even do the math around what that ratio is, but it's very outweighed. It's very outweighed in one way. And it just allows us to sort of give ourselves a little bit of grace, I guess. It's like we're emotive beings. Like, at the end of the day, we are driven by the emotions. We are restricted by the emotions. We're thrown in every direction because of the emotions. We are inconsistent because of our emotions. Like emotions. I know all of these things are anchored in emotions. But you know what, Steve? You said it yourself. We're not talking about it.
Yeah, we're not talking about it, and some people refuse it. They get so mad that I bring it up. I have had people, and it happens every single time when I start with emotions. When I do this from the stage, they walk out. They walk out, and I can count. Usually, the average is 2. Yeah, and it's usually, unfortunately, usually men, but usually older men. And I don't understand why that seems to happen, because there's some older white men that I know that preach the emotional resilience thing from the rafters. Right? Ray Dalio says it's the reason he's successful, right? In terms of his $1 trillion hedge fund. Because he focuses on emotional resilience. And so, because a lot of people, it makes them feel uncomfortable, because there's a lot of talk about, like, tell me how you feel. And they don't want to. So what I like to try to tell people is like, I'm not asking you to tell me how to feel. I'm asking you to talk to yourself about how you feel.
Yeah.
And I like to give it a name, because if you get, and emotions there's no good or bad. They're just big and distorting, or small and manageable. There's no such thing as a bad emotion. Guilt is not a bad emotion. Guilt is a great emotion if you get it small enough to be used as a behavioral correction device. Oh, I did that. I don't like how I did that. I don't like how that made that person feel. So going forward, it's always forward looking. So emotions that are forward looking are healthy. Emotions that are rear view mirror looking are going to destroy you. Right? Other than if you're using it for like literally in a more dispassionate, unemotional way. But you have to understand how they're factoring in. And most people, they don't want to think about it. They don't want to admit to it.
Yeah, but that's to bring it all back to why we're here and what this show's all about. It all further supports and reinforces your point right from the outset of the readiness and the understanding that every single time we convince ourselves that we may have actually finally arrived at readiness and that we've completed some sort of readiness course, some emotional behavior will kick in that immediately pushes that readiness back ahead. And my visual, as you've been talking, I'm background is in swimming, and I think of the footage when they put the Olympics on and someone's about to break a world record and they have that line like right in front of the swimmer the whole time while they're swimming down the pool. And it's like, this is the line of the world record. And then this is the swimmer, and their hands right on the line the whole time. And then sometimes right as they get tired at the end of the race, the line gets a little bit further ahead. And it's like, oh, they're not going to get it. They're not going to do it. They're not ready to break the world record right now. And it's just like that visual just flies through my mind, because that's what it's about. It's about, we can do the work when it comes to growth. And so much of what you've alluded to here with the alignment of beliefs and the decisive actions and high performance habits, that's when someone can read that and go, okay, this is going to help me navigate growth. This is going to help me set myself up for growth. But it doesn't necessarily answer whether or not I will be ready at any point, because that's the emotional part of it, where the Rebecca Mountains of the world, the Steve Mellors of the world come in and say, do you hear what you're saying right now? Do you understand how you're thinking right now? Because this is a system which gets you so far. Then we must acknowledge the emotional components that will come in and take the most robust system at times and find a really peculiar way to poke a hole at it and tell you that, hey, no, that habit that you thought you'd finally integrated and achieved, we're gonna throw a whole bunch of doubt at it today, and you're not going to be as consistent with that habit on this given day, just because for whatever reason you're experiencing a greater deal of doubt on that given day, and that's incredibly normal, right?
Yeah, and to give yourself, I mean, and that's like, I have a program, it's a 14-week program. It's the 12 stages I just gave you plus an intro and an exit. It's called 100 Days to Peak Performance, and it teaches the methodology that I just told you, which is called the mountain method. And the idea is that we climb mountains all of our lives, ride a bike, learn how to walk, get our first job, leave a cult. These are all different things. But at a certain time, as we get older, we lose our ability to actually go to the top, achieve, and move on, because we build out all of these excuses. We stop listening, because kids are actually, interestingly, very attuned with how they feel. They act based on how they feel. I am hungry. This makes me mad. I will cry. Right? You make me mad. I will cry. I will get mad. You make me laugh hysterically. I will screech in the middle of a restaurant. I don't fucking care, right? Because this is how I feel, and I'm going to act on how I feel. We don't. There's no barrier between the feeling and the thinking and the doing. But as we get older, we start having experiences which start to make us act in a different way. We start to protect ourselves, and this is how we're wired. We're not getting away from it. But then we start to turn back down. So, getting to understand then what that creates is what's called the knowing-doing gap. I know what to do, but I'm not doing it. There's a gap in between. This gap is what the mountain method is designed to help people first identify what your gap is made of. Right? Like, to what degree are you emotionally detached from yourself? Because some people do a lot of work. They have been through therapy, they do mindfulness training, gratitude training, all that kind of stuff. So maybe they're not quite as emotionally, off the rails as somebody else, but maybe they feel that they're not really doing what they need. Like decisive action has like gone to snots. So I actually create an assessment that people do, and it gives them a score. And your bottom 3 scores across those 12 sort of ideas in the mountain method, those are the biggest contributors to that gap. And so with the frameworks, and when you learn what frameworks, because you don't know what framework to use until you know what frameworks you need to use. And you're like, okay, like where do I suck, right? Where do I suck the most?
Yep.
And so when you have the frameworks, you're like, okay, I'm strong over here. And they're strong because they either have been practicing the framework or strategy already, or they've heard about it. And so they don't need a reminder. It's already part of their lives, but like, wow, I could go oof if I just practice this. And so because I'm a nerd and I want to know, success to me is not how many clients I have or how much money I make. It's great, but it's actually by how much do I shrink. On average, do people shrink their knowing doing gap? And so far what the math is showing is that when you align your beliefs, take decisive action, and practice high performance habit, that decreases by 30%.
Wow.
I thought it was going to be 10%, but the stats show consistently the average is 30%. So people are, again, that gap they need to cross, because you don't build a bridge because a bridge can fail. You have to close that gap. But imagine someone like me standing at the side of the road. My gap was like, you couldn't even see the other side. It's like, it's over there somewhere.
Right.
But, by consistently reprogramming, rewiring, doing all the training I need to do, like that gap has closed. And so my ability to take on the next big thing becomes easier and easier and easier, because I understand, okay, how do I feel about this thing? And that methodology, that scoring system is actually not a global, like, it's not a me thing, like it's not DISC. It's not a personality test. It's, okay, you want to achieve this thing. You want to double your income. You want to get a boyfriend. Do you want to get a husband? Do you want to get, I don't know, you want to work 50% less than what you're working right now. All of those are mountains. And so the assessment, like the questions you direct towards that specific thing, and it'll tell you for that thing that you want to do, how big is your gap? Is it tight? Is it wide? Can you even see the other side? So, and when you understand, okay, this is what's going to trip me up, and you have frameworks to close the gap, every single mountain you seek to climb, your excuses become less and less, because you catch yourself. Okay, that's just an excuse. Fact or fiction? Yeah, is it true? You go away from if to making that statement. You're like, what if, to like, no, this is it. And you build that little kernel of self-trust, and it grows and grows and grows. And the more that grows, again, the less of a gap that there is. My goal is to help people to have no gap. And if they even, and it's never going to always disappear if you're always growing, because you're always picking a new thing.
Yeah.
Right. So I've got giant new things I'm doing this year. Scare the living daylights out of myself. So my gap is like, whoop, we're back big again. But I know, okay, I know which areas are going to trip me up. I know what frameworks I can use to naturally bring that gap closed, so that I don't self-sabotage and not do what I need to do in order to make sure that I achieve whatever it is I want to achieve. That's what I'm like, this is my passion. This is my mission for the next 10 years of my life, or however long, I feel like I want to make it. People need to have that opportunity to close their gap and to feel that confidence, because then readiness they're never going to have to worry about it anymore. It'll be, something that they worried about in their past, and they're wondering, how did I ever worry about being ready? Because they're always moving. They're always ahead of that readiness line. They don't fall behind it anymore.
Yeah, I love it. And for me, capturing this entire conversation now, like, I want to be someone who is always approaching readiness, and I have an acceptance, if you will, that it's in the want to achieve it that might even be preventing me from doing what I need to do to approach it in the first place. And that's what I love about this, is whether it be a gap that you're trying to close, a mountain that you're trying to climb, whatever it might be, there's an opportunity for you right now to hear this conversation and to say, if I can just get out of this belief, there we are with that aligned belief. If I can get out of this belief that I have to have achieved readiness before I take that step, then I can actually start to take a step. If I can stop,
Yeah.
if I can get out of that belief.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
For me, like that's what I love about this conversation is for us to sort of start looking at growth that way, and just to say, hey, what do you want? Why do you want it? Who do you want it for? And how do you start to become more aware of just the belief system that you have at that start line?
Yep.
Because I can guarantee right now that there are people listening to this that are so committed to the idea of being ready to grow. And you've given them just what they needed to hear today to say, you know what? Quit telling yourself that you have to have achieved the readiness before you take the step. Just know that you're approaching it every single day. Some days you will get ahead of it. And then those days you better appreciate them because they're few and far between, because before you know it, you're going to set that next goal and you're going to get right behind that line again. But you're still going to be back on the journey, the path, and with that mindset that we are always in approach when it comes to this idea of readiness.
Yeah. And the nice thing, well, not the nice thing, the insidious thing about I'm waiting to be ready is because it never has a defined space, right? Like it's not like, every Tuesday you will be ready. Oh, okay, well, I guess I'll just wait till Tuesday and I'm ready. Yay, hoo. And our excuses continue to push. It's like a magnet, right? It repels. The readiness is repelled by excuses. It's convenient for people who are afraid or they're like confident, like whatever. The whole reason they're not doing that, my favorite, or actually my least favorite, I guess if you want to look at it this way, is I'm working on it. I'm trying. Like I wish I could, I should do that. I need to go to the gym. You hear someone say that, they're not going to the gym. So as a little sort of tip, and this is not new, I am not the first person to come up with this, but something that will help you make a big leap from in front of that readiness, sort of behind it or to the front, is when you say like, what do you want? So let's say I want, I just want to make 6 figures, right? Because it doesn't have to be $1 million. Success is not $1 million. Like lifestyle millionaires is what the world should be full of. Like you feel like $1 million because you have the life that you want, but you're not necessarily making $1 million. Your lifestyle is valued at $1 million. You have time, love, family, travel, like whatever. That's what the world should be full of. But the way to go from behind ready to ahead of it is to already imagine yourself having achieved it. And you can do that actually. So another little fun trick, you actually imagine yourself achieving it right before you go to bed, because when you wake up and when you go to sleep is the time your mind is most receptive. And we do most of our decision making actually and our sort of noodling around when we're asleep. 95% of our decisions are actually subconscious. Well, that means you have to be unconscious to make them. So if you go to bed, and I try this all the time because I'm super cynical. I'm like, this isn't going to work. So I try it and I'm like, okay, what do I want? And I'm going to imagine myself, not how am I going to get it? I skip that part and I go to, I'm actually there. So I've written my book and it's a bestseller and I'm selling millions of copies and it's fantastic and it's really changing lives. And I imagine that feeling. I imagine what I'm doing. I imagine everybody around me, right? I have this whole tableau and I'm just eyes closed, quietly going to bed. Like that's all I'm doing. And I get such an awesome feeling. So first of all, you're like flooded with all the happy endorphins. So you're going to go to bed and not have nightmares. And then while you're sleeping, your brain figures out the how. So you wake up the next day and you're like, well, that was a good sleep, because usually you do sleep well. But now your brain has already been factoring in what it is that you could do, right? It has ideas. You'll think of connections. You'll make, oh, like that totally makes sense. Why didn't I think about that? And so when you can use your brain for how it is designed, we always try to use our brain not how it's designed. We try to cram knowledge in here and assume that that's going to help. But again, my book coming out, knowing isn't enough. And the more you learn without doing, the worse it gets. Because then you're like, oh my God, I'm not doing anything, but I know all this stuff. I'm a smart person. Why can't I blah, blah, blah? Well, that's because you haven't crossed the gap. You haven't figured out what it's made of. You haven't gotten ahead of that readiness imaginary line, which you will never know when you have crossed it. You'll never know. You'll just look back and go, oh, I must have been ready.
I must have been ready.
Yeah, but you'll never see it coming. Never. Yeah. So that's the beauty, but it's a wonderful idea that people have to understand that you're never going to get there. And any excuse you make to not do something that moves you towards it is because you actually don't want it enough.
Mm-hmm. And that right there, folks, is going to be why Rebecca comes back on the show down the line, because we're gonna unpack that whole part of it another time, because I can't wait to do that, because that is without a doubt a huge part of this as well. You do, but we're not going to go there today. We're going to wrap right there, because this has been fantastic, and I want everyone to have enough time to digest this, take it all in. Just such good stuff. And Rebecca, before I let you go, where can we learn more about accessing some of these materials, some of these ideas, and obviously accessing you based off of this conversation today? Where can we learn more?
Well, all my socials have the same handle at Bex Mountain, so BEX Mountain, because Mountain is my last name. And then you can go to my website, which is also easy. It's RebeccaMountain.ca. So make sure you hit the CA part, because I'm from good old Canada. But yeah, so that's where all of my programs are. You can reach out to me. If you want to talk to me, you can book a call with me. I always like to get people to just reach out. And if you have questions, send me a DM on any of my socials. I always check. And, like I said, I'll reiterate my mission. My mission is to help the world take that knowing doing gap and eliminate it, so that whatever people want, whether it's work, life, or love, they can get what they want. So it's an open invitation to reach out to me.
Love it. Love it. Well, sign me up, and I'm so happy that we were able to bring you on the show to
Thank
discuss
you so much for having me.
that.
This has been
you're
fun.
so welcome. So welcome. And yes, all the best to you in 2026. What year is it now? 2026?
Oh, God, yeah.
Well, all the best to you in 2026, Rebecca, and I know we'll be talking again soon. So thanks again.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.